it's Cheyenne with Wisewood Apothecary. Thanks so much for coming out again and joining me for yet another edition of the Herb of the Month Club. This time around we're going to do a summary video for the spruce tree. We are looking at a spruce out in the woods where we want to be able to identify whether or not it is a spruce, a fir, or a pine. So when we look at the tree, if we look at the needles here, we want to see the needles coming out one at a time and that they are square. And if there's any cones on the tree, that they would be coming out from the bottom of the branch. That would help signify that we have a spruce. Fir trees have flat needles, whereas pine has many needles coming out of one point. So there are a lot of differences to our evergreen trees, but also a lot of similarities. So we want to make sure that we, for medicinal purposes, are using the correct tree, but for survival uses, actually they have a lot of interchangeable use. So really you could use a fir, a pine, or a spruce for many purposes, like shelter building, for fire starters from the resin, to needles as an emergency food, to inner bark as a food source, to the roots as a rope, all sorts of things like that. When you want to get into more of the subtleties of the medicinal side, that's when you want to be a little bit more specific. I have chickadees visiting right now. I guess they like me here. Hi, babies. Yeah, so basically we just want to make sure that we're using the right tree for the correct use and also using it in a sustainable way that's not going to harm the tree. If we want to use the tree for survival, we also need to make sure that the tree can survive. So basically, some tips to consider when wanting to harvest a spruce tree or any evergreen is the lower limbs are generally considered kind of sacrificial limbs to a tree. Those are the limbs that get used by animals and sometimes are ripped off in storms and things like that. That is what humans have the most access to, so humans can kind of rip them down and chop them up and things like that. So the lower branches are not where the trees store most of their resources. They actually store that near the top. So if you need to harvest some inner bark or the needles or anything like that, in my opinion, it's best to just take one whole branch and use everything that you can. So get all the inner bark that you can, use all of the needles that you can, harvest any resin that you get, use the wood for kindling and fire burning. That to me is the best, because then the tree has one wound to heal rather than several. So it's a lot easier for the tree. In terms of harvesting needles, the spruce tips are definitely, like, hands down the most delicious part of a spruce tree. But that being said, it is the new needle growth for the tree for the year, so we don't want to take too many from one tree. Remember the rule of 10, take no more than 10%. That leaves plenty for the tree to run its natural course, or the plant to run its natural course, as well as leaving plenty for other harvesters and foresters to come along and use it. So there are plenty of reasons to only take a little bit. So yeah, make sure that you're taking no more than 10% of a tree, and also no more than 10% of the healthy population. So you've got to be aware of things like that. Yeah, so when we're talking about roots, digging up roots is a little bit less sustainable because it can take away from the resources from the tree. So I would be careful with that, and I would do it off of healthy, well-established trees. If you've spent any time out in the woods, you'll know that they have roots sticking out from time to time that trip us and things like that. Those are excellent candidates to use. As long as they're but skinnier than your thumb, roughly, that's a good size to pull out for rope. You can use the pulled out root as is, or you can kind of half dry it and weave it into a proper rope that is longer lasting and a little bit more strong. So that is something that you can do as well. Yeah, basically we don't want to take any of the inner bark from the tree trunk. That is because you can or will kill the tree by doing something like that. It leaves it very vulnerable. So taking it from the branches is ideal, and like I said, taking off a whole branch and using everything that you can seems to be the best theory in my opinion. So yeah, things to consider. Basically, spruce is very abundant, and we can find it all over Alberta, all over the world really. There's many different species, and yeah, it's one of my favorite trees to think about. It's one of the first things I would go to in a survival situation. You can get just about anything you need from it: fire starters, food, medicine, shelter, tools, all sorts of things. So yeah, thanks so much for joining me again. I hope you have a wonderful New Year's Day, and have a Happy New Year!